Like we're streaming live. All right. I'm gonna share my screen then. We can get going. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Ahern, and welcome to part 2 of Reach the World's PD, or Professional Development Series. The second in our series is on moderating a video call. So with me, as yesterday, is my colleague, Tim Jacob. So I am Director of Partnerships, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Tim is a colleague and a friend who is the director of our Traveler program, and we're both very excited to be speaking with you today. So before we begin, I do want to mention just a couple of brief things. Number one, you are leaders in the world of virtual learning, and we are here for you now and will continue to support you however we can. This is not lip service. I am a former classroom teacher. I was lucky to teach middle school social studies. I actually started my career in high school level special education. Education is something that's really important to me. Some of the most important people in my life are current or former educators, and the work that you all are doing is both incredibly essential, but also we also know how hard it is, and we understand that. Myself and Tim both come from a classroom background, and so we want to provide as many supports, as many resources, as many things as possible for you to use however you want to use it. We have actually built a whole new section of our website to house anything and everything that we are doing for the next few weeks and months, and that is at athome, athome.reachtheworld.org. At the end of this presentation, I will also be giving you my email and Tim's email for that matter. If you ever have any questions, any comments, any concerns, please, 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 please reach out to us. So here's a quick overview of today's session. We're going to talk a little bit about just video calls in general. I'm going to review a few of the things that I mentioned yesterday on scheduling and preparing for video calls. Talk a little bit about hosting versus moderating. I sometimes will use the terms interchangeably, but they do really indicate two different sets of responsibilities. And then we'll get into both hosting and moderating video calls, share a few resources, and then finish up with some questions, comments, and conclusions. So just to briefly introduce myself, I am Chris Ahern. I am Director of Partnerships here at Reach the World, which means that I manage all of our K-12 partnerships throughout the US, as well as our friends who are working with us across the border in Canada. I also work really closely with Tim, who is hosting this call with me. He is the head of our Traveler program. So in traditional, what we would normally be doing at this time during the year is that I would be working with, supporting, and recruiting educators from throughout the country, and Tim would be doing the same thing with our travelers who are students who are on study abroad trips, Fulbright grantees, and other grantees who are doing research or teaching somewhere in the world, and also explorers. And as facilitators of virtual exchange, it's Tim and I work together to connect those really amazing young voices abroad with the incredible classrooms from pre-K through 12 that we have the opportunity to work with on a daily basis. That's about as far as I'm going to go into my normal day-to-day responsibilities on this call, because this whole conversation today is really meant to be about you and about sharing some of the expertise that Reach the World has developed over the past 20 years. And more specifically, myself, I've been working for Reach the World for about 5 years now. And I want to share a lot of that expertise with you all today, as well as in subsequent sessions. So very quick overview, and for those of you who joined us in the last session yesterday, this is a little bit of a review. There are many different types of video call platforms, but most schools use one of three: Zoom, Skype, or Hangouts. Now, all three of these have advantages and drawbacks, especially for the classroom. So we really want you to use what works best for your environment. Obviously, we are hosting this call on Zoom, and we will be mentioning a few features that are a little bit native, but not exclusively so to Zoom. The vast majority of what we talk about is definitely applicable in one way or another across all three platforms, as well as all of the other platforms that exist out there, whether you're talking about FaceTime or Blue Jeans or Citrix. They all definitely work, and they really work well for the classroom. I really, really want to stress that. Don't just use something because you're being told to use it. Use the thing that works best for you, and more importantly, for your students and their families. So this is, again, a little bit of a review from yesterday. Here are some of the highlights that we discussed. If you want to watch part one, the link to the actual video, the recorded video call, the live stream itself, is on our YouTube channel. You can also email myself or Tim for a direct link to that. But if you want to look at yesterday's slide deck, you can actually click on that at tinyurl.com/rtwpd-1. Again, that's tinyurl.com/rtwpd-1. And that will bring you right to the slide deck that includes all of that information. So out of the overview for this, it's setting up a video call can seem a lot more complex. It really comes down to setting up that time and date for your call, test your setup, maximize your computer's bandwidth and your computer's processing power, create norms for your students, and pay attention to the settings. I do want us to place a slight emphasis on creating norms. I was speaking about this with Tim just before we got on the call, and he made a really important point that it's best to create norms with your students before your first video call. I know from my time in the classroom, that was one of the best activities that I did with my students towards the beginning of the year, is allow that to be a collective development process. And you can still actually do that, especially through tools like in the Google Suites. You're talking about Google Docs and other things where everyone can kind of share their information in one centralized document. But getting your students to agree to those and help write those ahead of time can really build into a stronger experience when you start having these video calls. And I know that many of you already have. So hopefully this is a nice little review for you. So let's go into the meat of today's conversation: hosting and moderating video calls. So the way I would like to define a host is the organizer of the call, the person or persons who have the ability to manage the rest of the attendees. So when we're talking about here in the case of Zoom, I have the ability, as well as Tim, we have the ability to mute people. If we wanted to use some of the more advanced features, we could actually split out everyone who's attending the Zoom call live into breakout sessions. We can do all sorts of other things. If someone is being a little disruptive, we have the ability to send them away. So that way we can centralize the conversation to people who are adhering to the norms that we're setting. The host is also the person, like I'm showing right now, who is actually speaking and providing the bulk of that presentation. In the case of a moderator, another term that you could probably use is co-host, but it is another leader on the call who is really responsible for managing the flow of information. Now, because we want to practice what we preach, the reason why Tim and I are doing this together is that we want to make sure that these best practices that we're talking about are actually coming from the work that we do. And this is our typical way that we manage video calls, whether they are They are smaller, more intimate conversations with just a handful of people, to the large video calls that we've hosted where we have tens or more individuals on the call. But having both a host and a moderator is really, really important. The moderator can also be the person who is focused on the chat function. So we actually have Zoom integrated with YouTube Live. So hello to everyone who's watching me on our YouTube channel right now. But managing the chat, the conversations that are happening, to make sure that we all who are leading the conversation can be aware of any and all information that is happening, both down from downloading from me, as well as uploading, getting that information from you to me, so that way we can make sure that this is really fitting within whatever conversation that you're trying to have. So let's get into a little bit of hosting. The first thing that I want to mention is that you can do both. And any of us who have done our fair share of video calls know that we can and we have to do it. But the reason why we mention the differentiation between a host and moderator is that doing both is very challenging, especially to those of you who haven't done a lot of video calls and are still feeling a little bit new to them. The host needs to be focused on delivering the information, and the moderator can then focus on engagement. Now, if you are doing both, this is where limiting screen sharing is really important. I cannot see the chat bar right now. I can really only see what I'm sharing on my screen. So I have no idea what any of my wonderful viewers are seeing. But Tim, on the other hand, does have the ability to keep an eye on that. So that's just one really simple example of why we like to split out those responsibilities. Now, again, this is where you can divide and conquer. And I want to really emphasize that this is finding someone who can help you host and moderate is really important. So I'm sure some of those of you who are educators, if you may have some parents who are saying, hey, I have a little bit of free time right now. I'd love to help out with my students' learning. How can I do that? Or depending on what group of students you're working with, you may have access to a paraprofessional or someone who is typically working with you on a regular basis, and those responsibilities have shifted. They can be that assistant, so that way you can divide and conquer between one of you hosting and one of you moderating. We also have the ability to help you with that. So if you really want to be able to do that division of responsibilities, but you don't have anyone who can fulfill that for you, please email us. We actually have a growing list of members of our community, our volunteer community, as well as our global learning leader community, who are eager to help and provide support. And so if you want that help, please let us know. Email us at educators@reachtheworld.org, and we can set you up with someone and help you with that. Especially in the case of both of those groups that I mentioned, our volunteers and our global learning leaders, both are very well versed, and they will be able to also bring their expertise with you to support you however you need. Going back to the responsibilities of the moderator, as I said before, their main focus should be, again, on engagement. So focusing on the chat and ensuring that whatever norms that you and your students have agreed to are being maintained. We've heard a few really funny instances of some students really enjoying the chat function and diving headfirst into the use of emojis and all of the other fun things that you can add into chat boxes these days. But it's also a matter of, we have to be focused on instruction and making sure that communication, that students understand that communication is a valuable tool, but that the way that we represent ourselves online is critically important. To that point, when it comes to moderating a video call, Zoom, if you are using Zoom like we are now, saves the entire chat transcript, including private messages. So whoever has set up the video call, you actually receive a download of all of the messages that happen during that video call through Zoom. Not every video conferencing software works the same way, but it is important to note in particular for students who may not realize that. But this is a really great opportunity for you all as educators to remind students that we have to be very, very attentive as to how we share ourselves in an online space. And just because you think you're acting in a way that is private doesn't necessarily mean that it is private as one thinks. Again, the chat can be a place to define jargon or important vocabulary. For those of you who've had a chance to visit some of the other videos that we have been lucky to host on Reach the World's YouTube channel, you've seen us do this, that whoever is taking that moderator role, we're paying attention to the chat and we're just defining terms that may be challenging for students. So that way the students don't have to miss out on certain aspects of whoever is hosting the call because they don't quite understand a specific word or vocabulary term that's being used. I know that we have a really wonderful member of our educator community who's on this call with us, who is an expert in all things Flipgrid. But if you don't want to use the chat, you don't have to. And if you are using other video conferencing software outside of Zoom, it may be helpful to use Padlet or Flipgrid or some of the other technology that's out there, because it can bridge the synchronous aspect of this learning, synchronous being video calls like this, and the asynchronous parts of learning. So giving students an opportunity to respond to something within a time frame, but not at the exact same time. One of the best benefits to online or at-home learning is the blending of synchronous and asynchronous learning. And those types of tools can be really, really valuable in helping you assess what your students' learning is while all of this, all these other really great things are happening on your video screen. Lastly, please be mindful of poor connectivity and lag. So for example, as we're live streaming this to YouTube, there have been a lot of live streams to YouTube lately. And I believe in yesterday's video, we were actually stuck on one screen for about 10 minutes of the live stream itself. That is unfortunately sometimes that happens, and that's okay. It's just something that we sometimes have to deal with, and I mentioned that as an example of something that's happened from us because, okay, that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that whenever we're sharing a slide deck that we give it to everyone while the video call is happening or just after it's completed. So that way, if you miss something during that synchronous portion, you can still go back and asynchronously learn about what happened. But if connection issues happen, they happen. You want to do your best to prepare, but technology is still technology. There's still unpredictability because just like life, just like travel, things are unpredictable, and the best thing to do is to roll with them as they come. So very quickly, oops, sorry about that. So very quickly, I do want to mention a few resources. So these are the same ones that I shared yesterday. So these are all linked. So when I share this slide deck with everyone at the end of our presentation in just a few minutes, you will notice that the Zoom links are directly back to some resources that were manufactured by Zoom. Same thing with Skype. It goes to the Microsoft page, to Google. It goes into that, and it actually, Google's done a great job of not only showing what their features are for Hangouts, but more specifically to Google Classroom, and how the two intersect with one another, which I find to be really, really helpful. The last two are actually resources from Reach the World. So these are things that we have developed in-house. And so again, you can click on those, but the second of the two is actually an at-home learning folder where we have developed updated and recently went through and made sure that to only curate the best of the best of lessons, activities, and other resources that we have used and tested in the field. All of that is available for free for you for however and whenever you want to use it. Now I've seen a few pieces come in through the chat. So I'm going to turn it open to a conversation in just a few minutes. But first things first, if you do want to access this particular slide deck, it is accessible at tinyurl.com/RTWPD-2. Yesterday was -1, today's -2. We're trying to keep things simple. Hopefully that hasn't challenged anyone too much. Also, again, visit athome.reachtheworld.org for the most up-to-date information. I just had a call earlier today with some amazing folks that are helping us get this website ready to go. We are probably going to go live with a whole host of new stuff in the next few days, so be on the lookout for that. And always, please email me. My email is chris@reachtheworld.org. Tim's is tim@reachtheworld.org. And I cannot stress this enough. Please email us. Please ask us questions. Please just let us know how we can help. We are here to help. We want to help. So just tell us how we can. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and we will go into some conversations through the chat.
Great, Chris. Really nice job. You make hosting look so easy. And I just want to emphasize that is a product of lots of practice, and that for people who are new to the video conferencing world, it doesn't happen that way. I feel like it takes a while to understand the controls and how to control the flow of a digital conversation like this in a way that educators and practiced educators just know instinctually how to do in front of classrooms, but sometimes it's a steep learning curve when you don't have the wonderful tools, like my favorite of proximity, to be standing next to your kids and really like help them communicate your point that way. So yeah, the only thing I'd add to what you said, Chris, is that playing around with software like this and doing practice calls and becoming more familiar with where buttons like the mute button and the chat bar and organizing the fields of the call in a way that makes sense for you will help you become more comfortable with the role of being both a host and a moderator, whichever one you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exactly. It takes practice. It takes willingness to fail. In addition to hosting my fair share of these video calls, I'm lucky to represent Reach the World, and I have presented all over the country, which makes me a little bit more comfortable in doing a lot of these things. If anyone has ever seen me present at different conferences, and I have a feeling that some people who will be watching this on YouTube, either now or later, have definitely seen me, know that this presentation is just my style, and it took me a while to find my style. And I know anyone who spent time in the classroom knows that teaching is both a science and an art. And so the thing that I would just add is that this is a chance for you to hone your art through a different medium. Just like there are some people who are really skilled at painting or ceramics. There are others who are performance artists, and so this is for a way to develop skill in an adjacent but a slightly different medium. And so as daunting as this is, and as challenging as this can be, and Tim and I can commiserate with you. We have had some of the wildest tech difficulties that you can imagine in just about every environment you can imagine. That's part. It should always be seen as an opportunity rather than as a distraction. This is a chance for us to really provide technological skills and internet-based learning skills that will benefit your students for a lifetime. that everyone needs to have these skills cold for the future. So as much as the this is very much not what we were preparing to do when we were setting out at the beginning of this school year, there is an opportunity here to drill down to what is most necessary for student learning, while still paying attention and providing the supports to the students and families who need it most. And in that point, I will reiterate for the umpteenth time, this is not the first nor the last time I will say this. We are here to help you. We want to help you however we can, even if it is just hopping on to a video conferencing platform, Zoom, Skype, Hangouts, you name it, and doing a test call with you. I would be happy to do that with you as soon as tomorrow. You have my email now, so just fire away. So
Great.
unless there are any questions, we can end there.
We're right at our 30-minute mark, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if you have questions, please, like Chris said, please email us. We'd love to help you out.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. And tune in. Thursday is going to be part 3 in our PD sessions. And since we do have, we are lucky to have a really wonderful educator who's on the call with us, Christina Mesk. We will be actually hosting a call with her on Monday, where she's going to be sharing a little bit about what she's been doing in her particular classroom, which is I'm very, very excited for. So this is a little bit of a preview for that, and that's coming on Monday. You can visit athome.reachtheworld.org, athome.reachtheworld.org to sign up for that, as well as to see additional future PD sessions and other video calls that we will be hosting in the coming weeks.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
All right.
Bye, everyone.